Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to the GenBridge YouthZone podcast, where we explore teen experiences, culture, identity, and life across different backgrounds. And I'm Ninjin, and I was born and raised in Mongolia.
And I'm Amatar. I'm also born and raised in Mongolia.
And today, I'm joined by someone really special, our co-founder of GenBridge YouthZone, Minjin, and who grew up in America.
Yes, I'm currently living in America, and I've been living there since I was in first grade, but I also visit Mongolia every summer.
Okay. Our theme today is cultural exchange, how two Mongolian teens grow up in completely different worlds. We will talk about school, family, identity, stereotypes, and what it's like balancing multiple cultures. So let's get into it. And I want to start with school life because school shapes who we become. What was the school like for you growing up in the US?
So I had, before moving to the US, I'd gone to this international kindergarten, so in Korea, and there I started learning English. So the transition in terms of language when I first moved here wasn't too bad, and also I was pretty young. I was 6 years old, so I picked it up fast enough, and the transition was okay for me. But I think I definitely felt at times a bit isolated because there weren't a lot of Mongolian kids, especially in my city. For a long while, we were the only Mongolian family in my city, and it was hard to especially have friends that were Mongolian, because people that I knew my age that were Mongolian lived so far away, in San Francisco or someplace else.
Yeah, for me, school in Mongolia is different. For example, teachers can be stricter and academics are heavy, and friend groups are close but competitive. Expectations are high.
Yeah, that makes sense. I will say, in terms of my school experience, it might not be exactly reflective of most schools in the US, as I went to the school that I go to is pretty well known, California, and it's known for academics. So I was very grateful for this opportunity that I was raised here with these kinds of this kind of community. But I will say definitely it's still very much an American high school. So there are, of course, those strict teachers, but I think, yeah, for sure, there's kind of sometimes that stereotype of the more lax American teacher who kind of, lets things slide, and I definitely do see some of that in my classes. But it's a wide range, I would say.
Дараагийн болохоор нөгөөний family тэгээд identity гэж бодож байна. Тэгээд төлөө одоо бүгдээрээ өөр ингээд оронд өссөн ч гэсэн одоо тэгээд Mongolian families have such a strong influence on how we see ourselves. So I'm really curious, what was your home like growing up, Eminjin?
I think growing up in the US, it's, you see definitely other families where they're not as strict, but then there were times when I was young and I would kind of compare that to how my parents were with me, because I feel yeah, I agree. I think in Mongolian families and just the way people tend to raise their children, parents are a little stricter, and that's just kind of how the values are. So I'd hear about my friends being able to like go outside and like play, and I was like, oh, that's really nice. Like I wish I was allowed to do that like more relaxedly, but like, you know, my parents were definitely not as strict as they could have been for me growing up. And also I was really grateful that they like made me understand like my Mongolian culture. Like they sent me to these like Mongolian schools over the weekend when I was young to make sure that I could read and write Mongolian, and then I could at least like hold a conversation. And yeah, I'm glad that like my Mongolian has like maintained over the years, and I can like still talk to people my age in the language and also with adults.
So, do you speak Mongolian at home or was it mostly English?
Yeah, so at home I mostly speak Mongolian. Бэж автагаар ер нь ингээд монголоор ярьж чадна. Тэгээд би дүүтэйгээс ер нь монголоор ярихыг хичээдэг. Гэхдээ заримдаа англиар ингээд тойлж ярьдаг. Гэт унш ингээд ярьж тахта хамгийн сайн. Гэхдээ монголоор уншиж бичихөд миний зэскил бол арай хөхгүй байх одоохондоо л. But yeah, that's something I'm like trying to work on.
Энэ бол миний experiences бол ер нь бол Монгол юу лээ гэр бүлүүд ер нь бол strict гэж тардаг штэ. Гэхдээ манайх бол гайгүй байсан. Like less strict. Like би бол ингээд жоохон бахтаа л оройлох ингэж гарч мараад гадаа ингээд хүүхдтэй тоглолт байсан. Тэгээ нэг тийм тийш амар тийм хичээл бол шатахгүй байсан. Манай гэр бүлээс бол тэгээд энэ бол бусад гэр бүлээ бодвол гайгүй байсан. Тийм. Тэгээд so, was there something uniquely Mongolian in your home that you think other Americans might find interesting?
Let me think about it. I think just like there are definitely like a lot of like small things, but one that kind of comes to mind is like how I'd celebrate the new year with like my friends and like all everybody else at like, you know, December 1st, but also гэр бүлтэйгээ нөгөө Монголын шинэ жил болоход бас тэрнийг celebrate хийдэг байсан. And so like I think like yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think like yeah, I mean some of my friends found it cool, like, and also were like, oh, I didn't know it was like later in the year.
Та тэгтээ нөгөө нэг ганцаархнаа ингээд Mongolian families юм шүү дээ. Тэгэхээр эндэж айл малуудаар хийдэг бах тий.
Ер нь бол not really very often. Гэхдээ sometimes if there's like a New Year like party or like a get together or birthday, then like there's like a couple Mongolian families that do get together, but they don't live like very close by, so we'd have to like drive a bit like to go see them.
So for my final question, like did you ever struggle with your identity, like not feeling Mongolian enough in Mongolia and not feeling American enough in America?
I would say I would say like when I first moved to the US, because I was so young, like I like mostly kind of for a while thought of myself as like only being American, but it was only from like making friends here that were Mongolian that I started kind of thinking more about my culture and connecting more with my Mongolian side. But there were also times when I would like visit Mongolia in the summer, and I would like try to talk to people there and like even with my like language speaking skills, sometimes that wouldn't be quite enough to understand what they were talking about. But I think like this past year, like a lot of that has gotten a lot better. Like for example, I met Michelle and she and I became friends, and it was really fun, and I got to like really connect with people in Mongolia.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that, and the next segment. Not that.
So, okay, now let's have some fun. Let's talk about culture shock moments. And what surprised you most when visiting Mongolia for the first time?
Okay, so I think I've been visiting Mongolia since I was like quite young, like even when I was like 1 or 2. But like one of the first things I remember is probably like like for example, when you are walking by someone and you accidentally step on their foot and then you hold hands. Like I for a couple years, like that would like happen, and I just didn't really realize that was a thing. I was just like, oh, that's weird. They just try to hold my hand, and I like didn't realize that was like a Mongolian thing. But I got a little older, and then like partway through elementary school, I was like, oh, that is a Mongolian thing.
And what habits do Mongolians have that Americans don't get?
I don't think this is really like exactly a habit, but in terms of just like one thing I've overall noticed, I think like just with Mongolian people, they're more honest with like their feelings. I kind of felt like especially in the US, it's like people kind of tend to hide like how they feel about something, but I didn't really feel that way with like my friends in Mongolia and like family that I've seen and just people I've met.
Миний хувьд гэвэл надад юм school vibe нь арай Монголд одоо арай өөр байд юм шиг санагддаг. Ер нь Америкт арай нэг тийм илүү chill. Тэнгүүд Монголд ер нь л надад бүх юм жоохон strict байд юм шиг санагддаг.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Okay, so next, let's talk about something more practical, what everyday life looks like for someone who grew up in two cultures. So, let's start with teen life. And Injin, what was everyday life like for you in America as a teenager? Like routines, freedom, and expectations?
Okay, yeah. So, I'll start with routine. So, for me, I go to a school that school starts at 9 a.m., which I think like is on the later side for most schools. In California, I think it's like a law that school can't start before 8:30, and our school pushed it back a little farther, even to 9. And so I really like it myself as a teenager. It's nice to be able to like sleep in sometimes and still be on time for school. So school starts at 9, and we have like 7 classes in total, and that tends to be how it is for most schools as well. But I think one distinct thing about American schools is that maybe that like sports tends to be a bigger thing. My school's like on the more academic side, but it still is very big on sports. And so like for me, I usually will go to school from like 9 to 4, and then I'll have practice right after school for 3 hours, and then I'll come home and, do homework. And in terms of expectations, I would say like it's hard to say again just because of like my school situation. It's not exactly reflective of most schools in the US, but our like the expectations are a little higher, I think, at the school I go to, because it's pretty competitive and that can be stressful at times. But like when I meet with people from other schools in the US, I think definitely the expectations aren't so like, it's not really what the parents put on them. It's more the expectations they put for themselves. And that can be either like high or low, and it just kind of, it's more up to like the expectations kids set for themselves. As for freedom, I think my parents are on the stricter side, but it's still pretty like, I can still like stay out and do things every once in a while. So I just usually have to like tell my parents if I'm gonna be somewhere and they expect me home at a certain time, but things change. I'll be like, oh, Mom, I'm gonna grab dinner with some friends after practice. Is that okay? And I'll usually like send a text. And usually it's like okay as long as I have like a safe way of coming home and it's not like too late in the night and it's it's just like grabbing dinner or like really quickly studying with friends or something.
Did you have after school activities like going to the mall or something?
I myself don't really have too much time. For me, I have like it's either I have school and then right after school I practice for 3 hours and then I come home and I do homework, or on the days when I don't have practice, I just come home. I study for a bit. If I have time, I will maybe call some friends or watch a movie. But I will say, like with senior year, I haven't really been able to do as much of that. But I think over the summer, for sure, like I like to go to the mall with my friends and do fun things.
Okay, so the teen life in Mongolia өөр бараг адилхан юм уу та? Одоо манайх болохоор 8-аас эхэлдэг байхгүй юу? Өглөөний 8-аас. Тэгмүүдээ харин 11-р анги ороод бид нар илүү орой тардаг болсон. Гэт нэгтэй хоёр дахьт бол 4:30-аас тараад тэнгүүтээ бусад өдөр дээр нэг 6 мургааш тардаг болсон.
Oh wow.
Яа. Тэгээд би бас ингээд tutor дээр тавьдаг байхгүй юу? Тэнгүүд тэгээд tutor чинь 2 цаг болоод дээр нь гэртээ бараг 9:00 гэж ирээд дээр нь бол тийм спорт руу нь хийх тийм завгүй болсон. Уг нь бол тийм тэгээд тэр нь бол заримдаа ингээд тардаг өдрүүдэр болохоор би ингээд найзтайгаа хамт явж ингээд мол өдөр яваад эсвэл ингээд хамт кафед ингээд study хамт хийдэг. Тэгээд энэ бол тэгэл school life юм бол жоохон 11-р анги ороод ирсэн ч жоохон завуулаад эхэлсэн. Өмнө жил бол айгуугүй завтайсэн. Тэгээд okay, so I want to ask, how was the workload, more projects, and more creativity?
Wait, I'm so sorry. Could you repeat the question?
How was the workload, like more projects or more creativity?
Projects for school? Or,
yeah.
And like how what is like the workload for
Yeah,
projects just in general for school?
like for like homeworks and projects and stuff.
Oh yeah, okay. For my school, it really depends what courses you take. I am taking 4 APs this year, so it was a little bit more packed and definitely like more homework. And so because of that, I usually have like, let's say, it's hard to put into like an average, but usually after practice, I'll come home and I'll do homework for like 1 to 2 hours. But on the days that I don't have practice, I'll do it for I'll do homework for all of my preps, and so that's 3 hours in total. And then I'll come home and I'll do like 1 to 2 hours more. But it also really depends, like whether I have like a test coming up or something. And then also like I'll study over the weekends.
Okay, so next is the social life and what were friendships like in the US? Like, or your friend groups are big or small? Like, do you like switch friend groups a lot?
I think in general for the US, like especially when it comes to high school, friend groups can be very cliquey and they don't really change like past freshman year. I've been with my friend group since first grade, so but I think that might also just be a bit of an anomaly. But in general, like friend groups don't really change, and I would say like they tend to be on the bigger side once you get to high school, and it kind of just like, yeah, things don't usually switch around too much.
So миний хувьд бол би бол 3 сургууль шилжижсэн болохоор ингээд айгу өөр сургуулийн ингээд найзтайдаг. Энэ бол ингээд айгу олон ингээд friend group гэх юм уу. Тэгээ энэ сургуульд бол би бол нэг жоохон ингээд өөрөөр хүмүүстэй нийлдэг. Тэгтээ бас нэг тогтсон нэг friend groupтэй. Тэгээд өмнөх сургуулиудаар гэх юм бол ер нь бол бахан гээд хэсэг ингээд найзууд өгдөг. Тэр нь ингээд сургуулиуд ингээд шилжээд тахаар ингээд бас нөгөө нэг ингээд зарим хүмүүс чинь ингээд нэгдүгээр ангиасаа хойш ингээд найзлсан хүмүүс илүү ингээд stronger bond тааштай. Тэгээд ер нь бол энэ сургууль шилжихэд бол нэг тийм өөр ингэсэн нэг friend group гэх бол айгүй хэцүү байсан. Гэтэ сүүл рүүгээ тэгээд гайгүй тасаж эхлээд гайгүй болсон. Тийм. Okay. So growing up between two cultures and also gives you certain strange social skills even without thinking about your identity. So what skills do you think you develop because of your background? Like, do you think you communicate differently?
I think definitely like I had to develop a lot of like unique social skills because I have friends that are like, you know, like very much like American friends like I have in school, and also like Mongolian friends that I have outside of that. And so it's just kind of like, even with like switching languages, I feel like there's just differences in the way people talk and how people will talk about things, and so you just kind of have to be able to adjust to new situations, I guess.
Okay, so thank you. This was super interesting, and understanding the daily differences in life lifestyle habits. So the next segment 뭐들?
Одоо ингээд амжин одоо GenBridge-ийн co-founder гэдгээр мэдэн штэ. Then why did you co-found it?
Yeah, so I think it all started with kind of I like coming in to high school. I started to become more connected with my Mongolian friends, but even so, it was still only like a couple people. And in general, I noticed that when it came to like these like Mongolian events or like gatherings that would happen, like not a lot of people were like talking with each other or necessarily becoming friends, or even when people did talk, it was like usually in English and like not really talking in Mongolian. And so it just kind of felt like it would be a really cool idea to just examine exactly how Mongolian kids here in America are connected to their culture. And so I started with like examining that question in terms of the research perspective. And I talked to a professor at a college in Mongolia, and I asked her for like help creating this survey. I surveyed like 100 kids here in the US that are Mongolian, and in general we found that peer connection has the strongest link to like a higher sense of cultural connection, and that in turn can like help with like engagement. So that means like people who have more Mongolian friends are more likely to be connected to their culture, and also maybe visit Mongolia more often or want to like help their country, like things like that. And so I decided to create like a summer camp. The first one ran this past summer. We were able to get some kids who are Mongolian from the US, and also a lot of kids from who live directly in Mongolia, and we wanted to see like in general the effects of like having those peer connections there form. And I think with a summer camp especially, like bound to happen, you know, friendships are bound to happen. And yeah, like even for myself, I felt like by the end of it I felt like more connected to my Mongolian culture, and even my language like speaking skills, like it got a lot better. And yeah, felt like it was a positive experience.
And what is your long-term vision for the platform?
I think my next step would be to expand the summer camp to like even more kids, and then from there again like a more solid like what's the word, like seeing more solid results like more clearly, because I think you can definitely have that with like more kids. I also want to like in general hold more like hackathon type events, or events where like people need to like collaborate on projects, because another thing that I found when like researching cultural connection was that people who are like more connected to their culture or have like greater like cultural intelligence are more likely to be more creative and like have new perspectives on things, and like be entrepreneurs and think of future ideas. So in general, just to expand and also have more projects where people collaborate. Yeah.
So thank you for listening to today's episode. And if you're a teen with a story to share about your culture, your background, or your journey, GenBridge YouthZone is the perfect place for you. And stay connected, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next episode. And thank you for
Thank you.
And thank you for having me here. This was really interesting.